Wednesday, word. Wednesday, word. Wednesday, word. And we are live. What's going on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube Live? It is your man, Coach Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you should know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is transparency. As always, I like to share what I mean by my topic. So, what do I mean by the topic transparency? What I mean when I say transparency is really about how much we want people to see about us that determines really how much they can use against us. And so tonight I have 3 tools for the first row that I'd like to share with you when it comes to transparency. Let's jump straight in. Tool number 1 when it comes to transparency is assume observation. So in my book, Fire Your Job, Hire Your Passion, I talk about how we interact and how we are with people as, how we interact and how we are with people as when we know we're being observed versus when we do not know we're being observed. It has been scientifically proven that when we know we are being observed, we act differently than when we are being unobserved. One of the things that would be an example of this is like when I play video games, for instance. I'm focused on the video game, and so I'm not really paying attention on who's observing me, what my body may be flailing or doing. If I'm moving the controller, I don't do that anymore. But when I was a kid, I used to move the controller to play the video game. But my wife one day told me, she was like, babe, when you're like in like a intense situation in the game, your breathing elevates and you're like, like you would think that you are running in the game and you're not, but it's because I'm so focused on the game that I kind of lose my awareness about my surroundings in the aspect of, hey, my wife is sitting here next to me, or somebody is sitting and watching me play the game, whatever it may be. And they might, when I'm aware that they're there, I might be like, oh, I don't want to be breathing with my mouth all open or breathing all heavily. But once I'm no longer aware that I'm being observed, that breathing may elevate. You also see this in relationships when somebody has an environment, let's say that they communicate, and let's take social media. When Snapchat came out and it was the era of disappearing messages, right? People would interact differently than when it was like, hey, this is documented and it stays in the internet forever. And then they found out later that, hey, you might send them something that disappears, but over time, but they can screenshot what you send them. All of a sudden it was like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't be sending the stuff that I thought was okay to send that would disappear on Snapchat. Maybe I shouldn't be sending that stuff. And so again, if we're assuming that we're being observed or we're under observation, what that does when it comes to being transparent, the power of that is that it begins to push us to a state of trying to make choices that are actually probably better choices for us, because there is a person that we are, there's a person that we might be striving to become, and then there's the person that we want people to perceive us as, right? Think of this like a con man or a con woman. A con man or a con woman comes in, they realize they're being observed, so they will go into character, so to speak, in order to try to have people perceive them as who they want them to perceive them as. Now, when you're not focused on conning people and you're actually just focusing on transparency of decisions, actions, and your identity, when you're focused on those things, you begin to make decisions that will drive you towards trying to appear how you want to be perceived as people. If you want to be respected, you're going to try to make decisions that will show people that you are worthy, though you're already worthy of respect without that, but it'll show people that you are worthy of that respect. And so assuming observation, it's not so much about conforming to societal standards. It's not as much as trying to be somebody that you're not. but it's about the pause in between thought and action. Because when we assume that we're being observed, what we will do is, like, for instance, I say crime, typically a lot of break-ins or crimes of are like car break-ins and stuff like that are crimes of opportunity. When we assume we're being observed, all of a sudden that opportunity is like, yeah, no, I'm not going to make that stupid decision because it's going to come at a cost. Now, that doesn't mean that the person is a better person, but in that moment, they are making a decision that is better than the decision that they would probably have made if they felt like they weren't being observed, or if they felt like they could get away with it. So uh, that's tool number one. I'm going to leave it at that. Really, it's about it's operating in a space where we assume that we're being observed guides us to move towards who we really want to be, because we are actually trying to be perceived as somebody that we want to be perceived as by society. And so that's tool number one. Tool number two, when it comes to transparency, is that most people are accepting of mistakes. So remember, this topic for me was about feeling like there's a certain level of transparency that people don't want to provide to other people, because they feel like that information that they get in the transparent state can and will be used against them at a later time. But here's the reality: often we are our worst critics. We beat ourselves up probably more than the average person outside of us would be willing to beat us up mentally, we'll say. And most people are they understand that they're human, they're living their human experience, they're going through their journey, and they realize that their journey hasn't been flawless. And so the transparency aspect, instead of being afraid of what people can use against you, um, understanding that most people are accepting of your mistakes, is just being open and honest and transparent about the shortcomings that you've had, being open and honest and transparent about the struggles that you have. Not because your fear of them being used against you, but really it is to liberate yourself from the fear of being found out, that sits in the background somewhere. So there's, you can either be transparent or non-transparent. And if you have a non-transparency attitude, you can have a ton of skeletons that are in your closet, and all it's going to take is a little poke, and those skeletons are going to come flying out. Or you can have a transparent attitude, and really almost be on this spring cleaning cycle of, hey, I got some stuff in here that I'm not proud about, but I'm going to air it out. I'm going to dust it out. I'm going to shake the dust off of that thing so that it's out there and it's not festering within me. It's not creating odor. It's not creating anxiety. It's not creating depression. It's not creating regret, because I'm airing it out and I'm moving it into a space to where it can actually just kind of go and subside, versus stick with me and be held as a deep, dark secret that I have to hold on to. And this is the other part of most people accepting that, or most people are willing to accept mistakes. The reality is this: again, most of us have had mistakes, and we know what it is to be disappointed in ourselves. Like, disappointed in ourselves. I've made decisions sometimes where I was like, "Bro, that was a stupid decision," and you knew it was a stupid decision when you're making it. Being disappointed in myself. Um, but most people know what that feels like. And when you are open and honest and transparent with who you are, both the good of who you are and the bad of who you are, what you are doing is you are giving them an opportunity to decide for themselves if they want a person like you in their life. Now, they may decide, hey, I don't want to be around people that do that type of stuff or that have that kind of history. That's their prerogative to do. But you are giving them the choice, you're giving them the option to make that educated choice with all information. It's easy. My wife and I talk about, when we were dating, the whole representatives that people present, and I feel like in our relationship there was some representatives, but I feel like we were still, I would say we're like 90% still who we were. I think the representative aspect was just us being guarded from being in previous relationships. But that representative, you can present all the good things you do and keep all the bad things that you do behind this wall that nobody can see. But eventually, over the longevity of any relationship, they're gonna find out the things that are in the back, because if it's who you are, it's going to be at some point who you are. You can't not be that person. You can strive to not be that person, but eventually, every once in a while, it's going to slip out. And then the other part about most people accepting mistakes is we realize that most of us learn through our errors. And not only do we learn through our errors, sometimes others learn from our errors. Um, I forget who I was talking to. I was talking to a gentleman, and we were talking about fathers. And one of the things he said was like, "Yo, my father gave me an example of what not to do as a father by not being involved in my life. That's what he gave me as the example of a father." And in that, again, because he's being transparent, he's like, "Hey, this is the experience that I had. I grew up without a father. He wasn't around, and though his father may never have learned from that example or that error, he learned from that error, saying, this is not the relationship I would want to have with my kids. This is not what I would want to put my kids through." And so because of that, he's chosen a different route when it comes to his role as a father, and really being involved in his children's life. So really the aspect is he's not holding on to the grudge about, oh, my dad was never there for me and all these different things. He's not holding on to that. He's actually holding on to the lesson that he was able to get, and realizes by identifying as a father now, hey, my father made a mistake. It was a big mistake. Um, he's still not involved in my life today because of said mistake, but I learned that that's not a mistake that I wanted to make for myself when I became a father. And that's really why most people are accepting of mistakes, because number one, you're not removing their decision or their ability to make an educated choice, and number two, they understand that people make mistakes, and it actually gives them an opportunity to learn from your mistakes, versus you have this secret stockpile of mistakes that you're not sharing, and then they're running up to the same wall that you ran into because you weren't willing to share information because you didn't want to be transparent. So that's tool number two when it comes to transparency. And then finally, tool number three when it comes to transparency is walls erode over time. I don't care what you build your wall with. I don't care how secretive it is. I don't care how slick it is, how sleek, doesn't matter. I don't care how you design your wall. When it comes to transparency, you can have a non transparent attitude and not share anything with the world. But at some point, no matter how private you attempt to be, eventually the wall will erode and fall. And everything behind it may not come falling out over the boundary that you've set, but everything behind it will be available for view. It's almost like if that show Hoarders, where there's the house and there's a person who just has every square inch of their house is just full of stuff. And in that, when you're on the outside of their house, if they don't have stuff on the outside of their house, you assume when you open their door, their house is like typically every other house that you'll walk into. Maybe not the tidiest, but not packed to every square inch with stuff. And then somebody opens the door, or imagine the wall of that house falls over, right? Now all of a sudden everybody can see everything that's packed into your house, regardless if it falls out or not. That wall, that wall is going to or the absence, I'm sorry, of that wall is going to show that, hey, yo, there's some stuff in here that probably needs to be taken care of. And here's the thing about that: the having a wall up to create privacy, and to remove transparency or be non-transparent with people, it doesn't change what's on the other side of the wall. It doesn't change the trauma that's there. It doesn't change the mistakes that are there. It doesn't even change, honestly, who you are. It might change the perception of who you are, but it doesn't change who you are. It is not possible to um, exist in two different states of your own identity. We have an identity, unless you have a medical diagnosis with multiple identity disorder. But for the everyday person who has one identity, we have that one identity, and that identity encompasses who we are, both private and public. It's not, oh, well, I have my public identity and then I have my private identity. It's no different than me being on First Row. My wife and I have conversations about First Row content. Probably every week we have conversations about the content. But in having these conversations, it's not like she's talking to Billy Rowe, the First Row host, and then she's talking to Billy Rowe, her husband. I am one and the same person. And so the fact that that I'm aware that the walls erode over time, you're going to either do one of two things. You're either going to one, build that wall, not be transparent, and have to continue to maintain that wall for the rest of your life. And it's still going to break down and have cracks in it, and people are going to get glimpses behind the wall anyway. Or two, you're going to decide, hey, look, what's the purpose of this wall? Because the reality is I want people to accept me for me, not for who they think I am, not for who they want me to be, but for who I am, good, bad, and ugly. And so for me, I'd rather not have the wall, not be focused on doing the maintenance to keep the wall or keep up the facade, not do the maintenance to do that, than to have this wall that I have to make sure that stays in pristine order because my yard is jacked up on the other side of it. And here's the kicker to why it's important to realize that regardless of what you decide, walls erode over time, is that we think that being non-transparent really keeps us safe and protects us because we don't want people in our business, right? That's what we believe. A lot of people believe that. I used to believe that. But the reality is this: when we choose to be non-transparent, it's not keeping us safe. It's actually keeping us disconnected. And it's keeping us disconnected from two things. One, it's keeping us disconnected from others because people cannot truly form a genuine connection with you if they don't know who they're connecting with. They're just connecting with, oh, this is the parts of this person that I like. This, I don't know about that other stuff. And two, by not being transparent and thinking that you're keeping things private, really what you're also doing is saying there's an insecurity within me that doesn't allow me to feel like the entirety of me is enough to present to people and be accepted. It's a key indicator, at least in my experience, it has been a key indicator when I felt like I couldn't be transparent, when I wanted to be private and I didn't want people to know because I was embarrassed and I was shamed and all these different things. It was a key indicator to me that I was fearful that people knowing the real me would mean that they would reject me, and I didn't want to be rejected. And that's really why walls eroding over time is so important to get over, because when they erode or when you decide to proactively bring it down, people get the opportunity to truly accept you for who you are, good, bad, and ugly, no matter what decisions you have made in the present, past, or future decisions. So realize it takes a lot of work to continue to repair that privacy wall. But at the end of the day, this is what this identity series is about with the first row. The past three first rows, I'm sorry, the past three Wednesday words have been about identity. And this is really the end of this series of identity. But it's about being willing to put yourself out there and being willing to accept that if somebody rejects you, that they're genuinely rejecting you, maybe for their own reasons, or maybe because it's stuff they have going on, or maybe because they genuinely just don't want to be around a person like you, but they're at least rejecting you versus what you thought they wanted you to be, what they thought you were before the wall came crashing down, or even worse, who you tried to be when they never really wanted you to be that person, but you thought they wanted you to be that person, so you became that person. And it was never really who you wanted to be in the first place. So that's tool number three when it comes to transparency. Really quick, I want to go over these three tools with you for transparency tonight. Tool number one is assume observation. Again, make decisions like the world is watching, and it actually will drive you to make better decisions. Tool number two is most people are accepting of mistakes. We all, there's, again, I don't speak in absolutes very often, but we all, everyone has their own personal journey that they have traveled, and it has not been perfect. So we understand on a personal level, on a human level, what it is to fall short, what it is to not be perfect, what it is to make mistakes. And then tool number three is, again, walls will erode over time. Eventually the fence will fail. Eventually the fence will have cracks in it. Eventually the fence will fall. And most things behind that fence at that point will not hopefully, will be exposed, and hopefully not come pouring out onto the other side into what people thought you were, or who people thought you were. So that's what I have for you guys tonight on this particular topic, transparency. As always with the Wednesday Word, I have a story, something that really got me thinking about this topic. And I was actually thinking about which topic I wanted to close the identity series with on the Wednesday Word. But this particular topic kind of rose to the top because of last week. Last week we had the men's circle. And if you haven't been joining the men's circle and you're a man, please join the men's circle on Tuesdays. It's every other Tuesday, I'm sorry, at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But when we were having the men's circle last week, we were having this moment of vulnerability, and vulnerability and transparency kind of go hand in hand. And I was talking to the fellas about having an affair. And in having an affair, like this affair was in 2010 or 2010. But in having this affair, I was telling them about, like, this is what happened, this is what was going on, and having empathy for people who get caught up in affairs, because I can see through my own experience how that happens. And I'm not condoning like, oh, you should have affairs because they happen and that's just life. I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is, as I understand how they come about and what role they play and what role I played in mine and what role people play in affairs when there's two people interacting. But I started thinking about how I was able to be vulnerable and transparent about that experience. And it really came down to the fact that I've always had this attitude of let's get it over with. Like, that's my approach to things when things are going to be negative, when things are going to be hard, when things are going to be challenging or uncomfortable. I always have this approach that I take where it's like, let's just get it over with. There's not a whole lot we can do to change the situation, so let's start working through it right now. That's always been me. And because of that, when my transparency, when my affair took place, it was like, let's get it over with. It wasn't like let's hide it. It wasn't like let's not talk about it. Let's just kind of sweep it under the rug and move on with life and not really let anybody know. It was like, let's just get through this because there's work to be done. And once we get done with that work, we don't have to redo it again. And this is the benefit of transparency. This is where transparency really started coming into me, or coming to the top for the final topic of the Wednesday Word Identity series, is because I dealt with it in 2010, 2011, 2012. It was not a short dealings of overcoming that situation, but because I dealt with it then, it has no power over me in 2023. And this is the reality of transparency for me, is by being transparent and being open. Again, people have the opportunity to decide if they want to rock with me or they don't want to rock with me. That's nor here nor there. But by being transparent, I am actually removing the power that shame, depression, bad decisions, mistakes have over me. I'm removing it because it's out there in the open. I always say, if I were to become a politician, my opponent would be very mad at me because they wouldn't be able to run a smear campaign on me. Why? Because I'm very open and transparent about my mistakes. I'm open and transparent about my shortcomings. I'm open and transparent about who I am because it's who I am. And if you don't like who I am, then I mean, that's okay. You don't have to, because you don't have to be me. But at the end of the day, it's who I am. And so you can't run a smear campaign on somebody who is completely transparent and will just tell you like it is. And I've had people come in my life who thought they had to figure out what was behind the wall. And they do their research and they try to dig and they try to find these things out. And then I'm like, people are like, why are you wasting time trying to figure out what's behind the wall? He'll just tell you, like, he'll open this fence and say, come on in. It's a little bit of a mess back here, but you're welcome to come and learn whatever you can learn from my experiences. And that's really what this topic was about for me. Is it was really about unlocking the power of removing that leverage component that we think being transparent will create. Being transparent actually doesn't give people the ability to have leverage over you because of your past. It actually opens up your past and removes the leverage that your past would have on you, based on if somebody found out through covert means, or found out on their own and you never told them. So that's what this topic is about. It's really about, again, being transparent to make a connection with people that is genuine, that's authentic, and that is rooted in who your true identity is. So that way, when you're rolling around with people, they know who they're rolling around with, and hopefully vice versa. But that's what I have for you guys today. I appreciate you guys tuning in live. For those who are watching via the replay, thank you for watching via the replay. As always, you will catch me. This is the last show for this week. You can catch me next week. We do have a men's circle on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we do have a Wednesday word next week. And then after that, that's the end of the week content for next week. So this is the end for this week, but I cannot end this show, this particular show, I cannot end this show tonight without giving a shout out to my newborn grandson, Lucas Dean Torres. Welcome to the world. Welcome to the family. So happy to have you here. So elated to be a grandfather, because when I tell you being a father is difficult, whew, it's difficult. So I'm happy to be on level 2 of parenthood, which is grandparenthood. But shout out to him. Welcome to the world. We love you already, and we cannot wait to see the wonderful things that you bring into this world. But other than that, for the viewers, as always, if you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. I'm always happy to engage with you in the chat, or I'm happy to engage with you in the comments up to the first 7 days that the content is up. After that, I move on to the next content. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless. Thanks for sitting on the first row.